Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since its creation in 1913, the Federal Reserve System is focused on three key monetary policy objectives: maximum employment, price stability, and moderation of long-term interest rates. In 2010, the enactment of Dodd-Frank supercharged the Federal Reserve, bestowing it with even more power, influence, and control over the financial system, all while remaining shrouded in a mystery to the American people and, frankly, I believe, to us policymakers. In 2013, this committee conducted a Federal Reserve Centennial Oversight Project where we examined the Fed's actions since its creation. During our investigation, it became abundantly clear that the Federal Reserve has gone above and beyond its original mission statement. With the Federal Reserve having more power and responsibility than ever before, it is imperative the Fed adopts an opaque structure it's imperative the Fed adapts from its opaque structure and become more transparent and accountable to everyday Americans. The Fed's recent high degree of discretion and its lack of transparency in how it conducts monetary policy demonstrates not only that reforms are needed, but more important, that reforms are necessary. We need to modernize the Federal Reserve System and bring it into the 21st century, which is why I have introduced H.R. 3189, the Fed Oversight Reform and Modernization Act of 2015, or the FORM Act. This legislation will start to pull back the curtain at the Fed and increase accountability and transparency by doing such things as limiting Fed officials' blackout periods to discuss policy with Congress, opening the rulemaking process, and requiring the Fed to provide a cost-benefit analysis for every regulation that it issues. Additionally, the FORM Act requires the Federal Reserve to adopt a strategy-based guideline approach to monetary policy instead of continuing the ad hoc strategy currently being employed and communicate that rule to the public. H.R. 3189 improves the voting membership of the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee, by eliminating seat supremacy and ensuring each district bank president will be a voting member for the FOMC every other year. My legislation also reforms the Federal Reserve's emergency lending powers under Section 13.3 of the Federal Reserve Act, closing a glaring loophole and preventing future bailouts. Additionally, the FORM Act requires that the FOMC set interest rates on balances maintained at the Federal Reserve Bank by a depository institution and strengthens the Government Accountability Office's authority as well as its ability to audit the Federal Reserve and operations. And that is a notion that has passed this body twice in recent Congress on a large bipartisan manner. This legislation also increases transparency by requiring the Federal Reserve to disclose the salaries of highly paid employees. Additionally, H.R. 3189 strengthens the independence of the Board of Governors by allowing each governor to hire 2 staff members to provide sound expert advice independent of the Fed chair's influence. Lastly, this meaningful legislation requires Fed employees to abide by the same ethical requirements as other federal financial regulators, something that they currently don't fall under. Mr. Chairman, we cannot have such a powerful entity within the Federal Government operating on a whim. This legislation codifies common-sense principles when determining monetary policy and will develop a foundation for a rules-based monetary policy that will constrain the Fed's discretion without sacrificing the Fed's independence. In fact, I believe this strategy-based guideline is a key part of what we need to do today. It would also help the Fed to be more transparent in formulating and communicating monetary policy to not only open market participants, but also to the American public. It's time to bring the Federal Reserve out of the shadows and provide hardworking taxpayers with a more open and transparent government. I urge my colleagues to vote in support of H.R. 3189, the Federal Oversight Reform and Modernization Act of 2015. With that, I yield back.